Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the grim, bitter, rabid determination, hysterical determination of teachers' groups and school boards that have been infiltrated by radical teachers' unions to force, not just make available, but to brutally force LGBTQ propaganda, particularly sort of recently the trans stuff, onto school students. Now, it's not that they're going to say senior high school students that are like 17 or something. They're starting them at 4 and 5 years old, or even 3 to 5 years old, pushing this radical propaganda on them. Now, it's one thing to say to parents, look, we've got these LGBTQ trans classes, and we've got our teacher, our chief teacher to teach us this is Rachel Butch-Dyke-Stein, and we're going to get her to teach this, and so that's not what they're doing, and I was quite intrigued to see the lengths they're prepared to go to. And this was it's not a case of, look, it's available, parents, if you want your children to attend or something like that. That's not how they went about it. What we're talking here is levels of duplicity and trickery and treachery and deceit that boggle the mind. And it illustrates the absolute determination to force this propaganda on all school kids, regardless whether they want it or not. And it's unbelievably very heavy-handed. But I took some notes here because it surprised me. So I'll just get, here's just one school district. This is in the United States. Now they say, look, there are just classes on LGBTQ, just so kids get an understanding of what it's about, and it's an issue today. So if you want your children to attend, then this will give them a bit of a background to it and so on in a safe environment. And now even this was trickery and treachery, because they were going to push propaganda, and they had radical lesbian activists as posing as teachers, but really they're activists. They also were bringing in outside agencies, funded by USAID to spread this sort of indoctrination. Were being brought in. The slides and the various information I had were introducing highly sexualized themes to 4 and 5 year olds, for goodness sakes. And if you look at some of the slides were being used, they, in my view at least, they imply or suggest things such as fellatio, for goodness sakes. I mean, really? I mean, for 4 and 5 year old, I mean, that's insane, isn't it? But maybe not to rabid activists. But anyway, they just introduce it to parents as, look, if you want your kid, it's just a bit of orientation. Yeah, hey, look, we live in the current age. You probably want your kids to at least have an understanding of it. So that's but effectively no kids turned up. The parents weren't being sucked in by this bullshit. So anyway, they then regrouped. The activists regrouped. Now that would have been enough. I mean, if the parents don't want to attend, fine. They don't want the parents don't want their kids attending, fine. Just leave it at that. Have it as an available option, sure. But no. Kids had to attend. So their deceit didn't work with the parents. The parents were onto it. So they then switched it around. They got to, they regrouped, said, okay, well, we have to make it this now a mandatory class. So all kids must attend, but parents have the ability to opt out if they choose. So they did this, if you go onto this website, then you accept all our terms and conditions, that type of thing. So, and they made the mandatory class. This is the LGBTQ, all the trans stuff. They made it a mandatory class and tried to imply that if you didn't just plain didn't want to do this, you should go to another school, or the problem is you if you don't want your kids to do this. But they did have the opt-out clause, or the opt-out option so parents could. So the class is mandatory, but you have an opt-out. But they thought this would rope in a much bigger numbers, but in fact it didn't. So the people, the classroom was still empty, and there's the angry, bitter sort of lesbian activist, radical activist teacher there, or propagandist there, getting angrier and jumping up and down. Well, why we want these kids to indoctrinate? Because they're all going to turn into hateful people, and they're all going to turn into Hitler, and so on. The normal crap that these idiots rave on about. So it's still a near empty room. So again, they went off and regrouped. Okay, we have to force the propaganda on these kids. How do we do it? Each time they're upping the ante here. It's no longer a choice. They're determined to do it no matter what. They will bulldoze this through, no matter what. But they still have to give this sort of veneer of, well, it's a choice, and so they changed it again to a mandatory class, but they renamed it. So they just gave it a different name so that maybe the parents wouldn't cotton on to that. Actually, hey, hold on, that's the LG. So they referred to it as various names of coming to understand progressive and current norms in our society. That so the parents, okay, that's not, and hopefully the parents won't notice that. So again, the levels of deceit are really annoying here. Now, then they tell the kids. So the first class comes along, and they tell, don't tell your parents. Those evil Nazi fascist Hitlers won't understand. Only us, the angry lesbians, are the holders of the moral high ground here. And so the parents could no longer choose to opt out their kids. Only the kids could opt out. So you're going to say to a 4 or 5-year-old kid, "You want to opt out?" And they're going, "Oh yeah, I want to opt out." Well, you better not. You'll be in trouble with the teacher. Oh, okay. So again, it's intimidation, coercion, and I would argue treachery. The parents did nonetheless cotton onto it, and so kicked up a fuss. So again, the classroom, the propaganda classroom, was empty. So then they just made it blanket mandatory, no opt out, and if the parents want to opt out, again, too bad, you can't opt out. Now it was no surprise that various parental groups around the place decided to contest this in court. And again, this gives you an idea of the power of these LGBTQ activists, teachers unions, and so on. All these. Just on this particular school board, everyone on the school board was an LGBTQ activist. The married men and women with their husbands and this sort of thing, and the married lesbians, all this sort of stuff. And they're super woke. They're beyond woke. I mean, how do they get to the top of these school boards in the first place, or these departments of education? They're obviously being put there purposefully. So, and they have a lot of local power. So when the parent group takes this to the local court, the judge rules in favour of the lesbian activists. It goes to an appeal court. That court then rules in favour of the lesbian activists, and that 4 and 5-year-old children have to be coerced into. I mean, you got to be kidding me. It then goes, moves up the legal food chain, and finally they get a decision again, that is against the teachers and against the activists, that it should be optional, and that the parents should have some sort of say in the course material. This outrages the activist groups. We have to force propaganda on these kids, because if we don't, they'll all turn into Hitler, and the insanity of the whole thing. But it illustrates the lengths they're prepared to go to. Now, when you look at, say, the the rigging of the 2020 election, or the placement of radical activist judges by the Democrat, when you look at that and see it in the wider picture there, the mosaic of what they're doing, then you can see that they're prepared to do anything and everything, any cheating, any lying, any rigging, any fixing, any duplicity, any false claims, and so they're prepared to do it all in order to get their way. And that's scary. You've been with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for listening.